They thought walking away would break you. They thought their silence, their betrayal, their sudden absence would reduce you to nothing. But what they failed to understand is that you were not built on their approval. You were built on struggle, forged in quiet endurance, and refined by the fire of disappointment. Yes, you were hurt, but you didn't stay hurt. You rose. You took the ashes of what they tried to destroy and built something they could never touch. A version of you that is sharper, wiser, and untouchable. They believed they were ending a chapter, but all they did was ignite the beginning of a legacy. Betrayal is a catalyst for inner resurrection. Betrayal doesn't simply break the heart. It shatters the illusion that the people closest to us are who we believe them to be. It rips apart the fabric of trust, leaving us exposed to the raw and painful truth that not everyone has the capacity to honor the depth of our loyalty. But what feels like destruction in the moment often becomes the soil in which our transformation begins. In the initial stages, it feels like collapse. You question yourself, your judgment, and your worth. You replay the moments, searching for signs you missed. You ask the impossible questions. Why would they do this? What did I do to deserve it? But the real shift starts when you stop asking why they betrayed you and start asking what this pain is calling you to become. There is something ancient and spiritual about the experience of betrayal. It confronts your idealism and forces you to see the world as it is, not as you hoped it would be. And while that realization hurts, it clears the illusions that once blinded you. It sobers the soul. You become aware, not cynical, but wise. You begin to discern not only who deserves access to your life, but who never should have had that access in the first place. Pain has a strange way of awakening what comfort never could. Betrayal stirs something deep within us, a primal force that says, "You will not end here." It calls you to rebuild, not just your circumstances, but your character. It becomes a mirror through which you see the gaps in your boundaries, the silence in your voice, and the places you were waiting for others to validate your worth. And then something remarkable happens. You stop waiting. You stop hoping that those who hurt you will fix it. You begin to take that power back. This is the resurrection moment. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. Often it begins in silence, in the small choices you make daily to rise again. You wake up with heaviness, but you still move forward. You begin to reclaim your identity, not as a reaction to what happened, but as a declaration of who you refuse to stop becoming. That's when the shift occurs, when the betrayal no longer defines your pain, but your rebirth. There's an inner strength that only pain can awaken, not the superficial strength of pretending you're fine, but the deep, immovable strength of someone who has faced devastation and kept walking. You begin to value your solitude more. You learn to enjoy your own presence. You stop reaching for people who wouldn't even reach back. That self-respect becomes your shield. It's not arrogance, it's clarity. Ironically, those who betrayed you expected you to fall apart. That was their silent victory, the hope that without them, you would collapse. But betrayal has a hidden power. It doesn't just show you who others are. It shows you who you are capable of becoming. In losing them, you found parts of yourself that had been buried beneath compromise. Your voice becomes clearer. Your vision becomes sharper. Your standards rise not out of bitterness, but out of the realization that your soul deserves better. There is a sacred space between who you were before the betrayal and who you become after it. In that space, you are vulnerable, uncertain, and tempted to shut down. But if you stay present in it, if you don't numb it or rush it, that's where the transformation occurs. That's where the old self dies and the new self is born. Not in revenge, not in spite, but in resilience. This is the kind of growth that can't be faked. It's earned in silence, it's forged in the dark, and it shows up later, not as noise, but as unshakable presence. What tried to bury you became your beginning. What tried to silence you only taught you how to speak with more conviction. What left you broken didn't leave you empty. It left you open, and in that openness, you finally met the version of yourself you had forgotten was possible. That is the power of betrayal. When faced honestly and walked through with intention, it becomes the doorway through which you are resurrected into something more powerful than you ever were before. You may still feel the sting of it, but you're no longer defined by it. You're no longer haunted by the absence of those who couldn't value your presence. You've risen, and in doing so, you've proved that the end they wished for you was only the beginning of your awakening. Pain, when transformed, becomes power. Pain has a way of introducing itself when we least expect it, often disguised as loss, betrayal, rejection, or abandonment. It arrives without permission and lingers longer than we want it to. But while pain may feel like the end, it can actually be the beginning of a deeper, more authentic version of ourselves, forged through fire, not comfort. There is a kind of pain that breaks the surface of your everyday life and exposes everything beneath. It doesn't just hurt, it reveals. It shows you where your identity was tied too tightly to someone else's acceptance. It reveals the illusions you held about safety, certainty, or control. But even more than that, pain invites you, forces you to look at yourself without the distractions, without the noise, without the masks you used to wear to keep the peace. That moment of raw self-confrontation is not weakness. It is the birthplace of transformation. Most people try to avoid pain. They numb it, bury it, deny it, or distract themselves from it. But when you choose instead to feel it, to sit with it, and to understand it, that's when everything starts to shift. You begin to see that pain itself is not the enemy. It's what you do with it that determines whether it becomes a weight that drowns you or a force that drives you forward. When you allow pain to shape you instead of destroy you, you reclaim your power. That doesn't mean you stop hurting. It means you stop letting the hurt define what you're capable of. You begin to integrate the pain into your story, not as a tragedy, but as a turning point. You don't forget what happened, but you no longer need it to be fixed in order to move forward. That is power. That is strength. That is healing with your eyes wide open. True power doesn't come from pretending to be unaffected. It comes from being deeply affected and still choosing to stand. It comes from feeling the full weight of the experience, the grief, the confusion, the disappointment, and not letting it pull you under. You carry it, not as a burden, but as a reminder of what you've overcome. And every time you rise despite it, you become a little stronger, a little clearer, a little more aligned with the truth of who you are. There is also a sacred defiance that grows out of pain. The decision that no matter what has been done to you, you will not allow yourself to become bitter or small. You will not let the betrayal shape you into someone who mirrors it. Instead, you rise above it, not in denial, but in deliberate opposition to what tried to reduce you. That's not just survival. That's alchemy. That's the ability to take something dark and turn it into something deeply purposeful. People often associate power with dominance, control, or force, but real power is far more subtle and far more resilient. It is the ability to hold your center when everything around you is falling apart. It is the strength to choose integrity over reaction. It is the quiet confidence that no matter what you've lost, you are not lost. You're still here. You're still becoming. Pain, when transformed, also teaches you how to lead yourself. It shows you the places where you gave too much and received too little. It teaches you to stop outsourcing your validation to those who can't even respect their own reflection. It reorients your inner compass, making you more honest with yourself about what you want, what you need, and what you will no longer tolerate. And the beauty of this transformation is that it's not loud, it doesn't need to be announced or performed. It reveals itself over time in the way you walk differently, speak differently, set boundaries more firmly, and carry your history without shame. You stop needing people to understand your pain because you've already done the work to understand it yourself. You become the safe place you were once searching for. There is no shortcut through this process, no easy path to this kind of strength. It's earned. And that's what makes it powerful. Because once you've walked through fire and turned your wounds into wisdom, no one can take that away from you. That kind of power isn't performative. It's permanent. It stays with you. It becomes part of your posture, your presence, your perspective. So when people look at you and wonder how you've become so calm, so focused, so unshakable, they won't see the nights you cried or the battles you fought in silence. They won't see the inner wars you had to win just to breathe again. But you will know. And that knowing will be enough. Because your strength didn't come from escaping pain. It came from facing it. And in doing so, you became powerful in the most unshakable way. Through truth, through endurance, and through the quiet, relentless choice to rise. Your comeback is not for revenge, it's for redemption. The moment someone betrays you, it's tempting to believe that your healing will be found in proving them wrong. You imagine your comeback as a display of strength they'll be forced to witness, a dramatic reversal where your success exposes their failure. And while that fantasy can feel satisfying for a moment, it's not where your true power lives. Because real healing doesn't come through revenge, it's through redemption. And that redemption is for you, not for them. When someone walks away or wounds you with deceit, the initial pain is sharp and personal. You want them to see what they've done. You want them to feel even a fraction of the confusion or the sorrow they left you with. That desire is human. It's a natural response to injustice. But if you stay in that space too long, your growth becomes reactive. Your evolution becomes tied to their attention. And that means they still hold power over your life, even in their absence. Redemption, on the other hand, doesn't need an audience. It doesn't wait for acknowledgement or applause. It's a quiet, deeply personal process. It's the decision to rise not against someone else, but for yourself. It's about reclaiming the parts of you that were lost, silenced, or fractured by the pain. Your comeback, in its truest form, isn't about showing them what they missed. It's about rediscovering what you nearly forgot was within you. When you choose redemption over revenge, you start to heal differently. You stop performing strength and start embodying it. You don't need to post about your progress or prove your peace. You simply live in it. You begin to understand that your growth doesn't require their regret. Your future doesn't depend on their apology. You no longer need closure from the person who broke the story. You become your own conclusion. There's something deeply powerful about walking away, not because you were defeated, but because you outgrew the battlefield. You realize that the energy spent trying to make someone understand your worth is energy better spent becoming that worth. Redemption means you stop shrinking yourself to be understood by those who were committed to misunderstanding you. It's the freedom to exist without needing to justify your healing or explain your boundaries. The irony is this: when you truly begin to rise, the ones who hurt you will notice. But by the time they do, you'll no longer care if they notice at all. That's when you'll know your redemption is real. It's no longer about their reaction, it's about your rebirth. Your peace becomes louder than your pain. Your focus becomes stronger than your grief. You're no longer in competition with the past, you're building something beyond it. Revenge wants to be seen. Redemption is content in the unseen. Revenge burns hot and fast. It consumes you while trying to consume them. But redemption builds slow and strong. It creates something that lasts, something that can't be taken away when the attention fades or the crowd goes quiet. It's rooted in the kind of self-respect that doesn't require validation. It's anchored in the understanding that you are not what happened to you. You are what you chose to become after it. When you live for revenge, you risk becoming a reflection of the very thing you're trying to rise above. You start shaping your life in reaction to someone else's brokenness rather than from your own clarity. But when you pursue redemption, you start building from a different foundation, one that is rooted in healing, truth, and purpose. You stop needing others to fall in order for you to rise. And that changes everything. You no longer need them to fail. You no longer wish for their regret. You're no longer trying to trigger their guilt. Your freedom isn't contingent on their suffering. It's based on your decision to evolve. That's when you become truly untouchable, because they can no longer affect you in the way they once did. Not because the memory disappeared, but because you've outgrown the version of yourself that needed anything from them. Redemption is also where your peace returns, not the fragile kind of peace that's easily disrupted by the mention of their name, but a deep, unshakable peace that comes from having faced the storm and survived. You stop flinching at the past. You stop needing to explain your scars. You simply carry them as evidence of your endurance. Your story is not about what they did. It's about what you did with what they left behind. It's about how you picked up the pieces and rebuilt, not into something bitter or closed off, but into someone wiser, stronger, and more grounded. That is redemption. That is the comeback that can't be undone. And no one, not even those who broke you, can take that away. Betrayal reveals true allegiances and hidden weaknesses. Betrayal doesn't just cut deep, it exposes. It reveals what was hidden behind smiles masked in politeness and cloaked in convenience. When someone turns on you, it feels sudden, but more often than not, it was building silently in the background, waiting for the right moment to show itself. And when it does, you're not just left hurt, you're left aware, more awake than you've ever been. The painful truth is that betrayal is rarely a one-time decision. It's a series of moments where someone had the opportunity to honor you but chose not to. It's quiet disloyalty before the final act of abandonment. And when it finally breaks the surface, what it exposes is far greater than the act itself. It unmasks who that person truly was the entire time. Sometimes betrayal comes from those you trusted most. Friends, partners, family members, people who once claimed to understand your heart. And that's what makes it sting so sharply. It's not just the action, it's the realization that the loyalty you gave so freely was never returned with the same depth. That realization doesn't just shift your relationship with them, it shifts your relationship with yourself. You start questioning your judgment, your ability to discern, your capacity to see people clearly. But over time, that self-doubt can become your wisdom. Because betrayal, when processed correctly, becomes a teacher. It sharpens your perception. It teaches you to listen not just to what people say, but to what they consistently do. It shows you that real loyalty is not loud. It's proven in moments when no one's watching. It's proven in how people treat you when they no longer need anything from you. It's proven in silence, in absence, in how they show up, when it costs them something. You start to realize that some people were only loyal to your convenience, to your usefulness, to the version of you that served their comfort. And when that version evolved, when you started growing, when you began honoring yourself more, they didn't know how to stand beside you. Not because you became worse, but because you became harder to control. And that's when betrayal often shows up. When your transformation threatens their comfort. When your healing confronts their dysfunction. Some people will betray you not because you wronged them, but because your growth reminded them of everything they've refused to face in themselves. Your boundaries called out their entitlement. Your clarity exposed their manipulation. And instead of facing that truth, they ran, or worse, they tried to sabotage you on the way out. This is the part most people don't talk about. Betrayal isn't just about broken promises. It's about hidden weakness. Weakness not in you, but in them. It's about their inability to hold integrity when tested. Their inability to love without controlling. Their inability to stay loyal when the dynamics change. What they did reveals more about their emotional immaturity than it does about your worth. And understanding that doesn't remove the pain, but it does remove the illusion. There's power in seeing clearly. Even if what you see is ugly, clarity may hurt at first, but it protects you long term. It frees you from repeating cycles. It teaches you to walk more slowly into relationships, to observe before you attach, to honor red flags instead of negotiating with them. Betrayal doesn't make you cold. It makes you precise, more careful with your access, more intentional with your energy, or selective with your love. The hard truth is, not everyone who claims to be with you is truly for you. Some are only present when it benefits them. Some stay close, not out of love, but out of convenience. And betrayal, as brutal as it is, has a way of sweeping those people out of your life. It's not just an ending, it's a cleansing, a painful but necessary removal of what was never solid to begin with. Eventually, you stop mourning what you lost and start respecting what was revealed. You stop blaming yourself for not seeing it sooner and start appreciating the lessons you now carry. You learn that your heart was never the problem. Your openness was never your weakness. Their lack of integrity was not your fault. You simply loved from a place they were never ready to meet. And here's what matters most. You don't need to become like them to protect yourself. You don't need to close your heart or harden your spirit. What you need is awareness, discernment, wisdom that comes from pain but refuses to turn into poison. You can remain kind without being naive. You can stay open without being accessible to just anyone. Betrayal taught you that. It also taught you something else, that your value is not determined by how others treat you, but by how you respond when they don't. You didn't crumble. You didn't become vengeful. You didn't stoop to their level. You observed. You grieved. You learned. And then you rose. That's not weakness. That's not fragility. That's strength of the highest order. Because the people who betrayed you didn't win. They revealed themselves. And in doing so, they gave you the gift of clarity. A painful gift, yes, but one that freed you from false connections, shallow loyalty, and performative love. You now know who you are without them, and that knowledge is unshakable. The new you no longer seeks validation. You've built inner authority. There comes a moment in every person's journey where the search for approval ends. Not because you've become indifferent or bitter, but because you've discovered something stronger than validation: self-recognition. You've stopped needing the applause, the approval, the nod of recognition from people who once couldn't even value your presence. That shift doesn't happen overnight. It's born from pain, matured through betrayal, and sealed by the realization that your worth was never meant to be outsourced. In the early stages of your life, especially if you are a giver, a peacemaker, or someone who deeply values connection, you find yourself constantly adapting. You adjust your tone so others feel safe. You shrink your needs so others are comfortable. You overextend yourself just to keep harmony. And you do it all in the name of being good, being liked, being accepted. At first, it feels noble, but with time, it becomes exhausting. Because what starts as love quickly becomes performance. You begin to notice that your value in people's lives often hinges on your ability to make them feel good. The moment you ask for something in return, the moment you become less agreeable, more honest, more assertive, things changed. Their affection becomes conditional. Their loyalty begins to fade. And that's when it hits you. The version of you they loved was never the full version. It was the edited one. A realization is what begins the path back to yourself. You start asking harder questions. Who am I when I'm not trying to please? What do I believe when I'm not trying to fit in? What do I truly want when I stop living for other people's comfort? Those questions don't lead to easy answers, but they lead to a more authentic life. And from that authenticity, inner authority begins to rise. Inner authority is not arrogance. It's not loud. It doesn't need to announce itself. It's the quiet, grounded confidence of someone who no longer looks outside to know what to do inside. It's the strength of someone who has been tested, who has stood alone, doubted themselves, and still decided to move forward. That kind of strength can't be faked. It's earned. As you build inner authority, you become less reactive. You stop needing to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You no longer waste your breath trying to be seen by the blind or heard by the unwilling. Your energy becomes sacred. Your silence becomes strategic. You learn that you don't need to fight every narrative or correct every rumor. You know who you are. That's enough. The new you doesn't chase. You don't chase friendships, love, or recognition. You attract what aligns. You stop auditioning for spaces that require you to shrink. You walk away from tables where your voice is only welcome if it's soft, agreeable, or convenient. You create your own table. You build a life that doesn't demand compromise of your character for connection. And in that space, you find peace. One of the most powerful signs of inner authority is how you handle rejection. Where once it would have shattered you, now it shapes you. You no longer see rejection as a reflection of your inadequacy, but as a redirection toward alignment. You don't beg people to stay. You don't force conversations. You let what isn't meant for you fall away, not because you don't care, but because you care too much about yourself to settle. Inner authority also reshapes how you view failure. It's no longer a verdict, it's data, information, a necessary teacher in the evolution of your purpose. You stop seeing setbacks as shameful and start seeing them as sacred. Each fall becomes an invitation to rise with more clarity. You stop hiding your scars. You start honoring them. They remind you of what you've survived, of what you've overcome, of what you've built when no one believed in you. This version of you no longer seeks to be understood by everyone, especially not those who were never capable of seeing your depth. You recognize that some people are committed to their shallow version of you, and trying to convince them otherwise is a waste of the life you're meant to live. You stop managing their perception and start focusing on your progression. And most importantly, the new you doesn't need revenge. You don't need to prove anything to those who doubted you, ghosted you, or betrayed you. The life you're building speaks for itself. The peace you carry is the loudest response. The joy you feel, even after everything, is proof that their actions didn't win. Your inner authority outlived their disloyalty. You've become someone rooted, someone who doesn't crumble under silence, who doesn't beg for affirmation, who doesn't need constant reassurance to feel whole. That kind of strength is rare, and you earned it. Through every disappointment, every letdown, every moment of solitude that forced you to turn inward and find your own voice. That voice, your own, is now your guide. So no, you don't need the old version of you who kept shrinking to be loved. That version was just surviving. This one is thriving. And it's not because the world changed, it's because you did.